Why everything in your life seems so difficult. In this video, I'm going to explain to you why everything in your life seems so difficult and how we can make everything in our life seem so easy. By the end of this video, you're going to be sitting there going, that makes sense. Hopefully that's the case. Anyway, the first reason why everything in your life seems so difficult is that you're receiving so much less dopamine from doing the things that you want to do compared to the things that you're doing all the time. What do I mean by this? Well, for most of us, we get up in the morning, we go on our phones. The first thing we do is we start scrolling. We start getting a little bit of dopamine. Maybe we're scrolling TikTok. Maybe we're scrolling our newsfeed. Maybe we're scrolling Instagram. Either way, we're scrolling. We're providing ourselves with that level of artificial stimulation, that little hit of dopamine. Then what happens? Well, we probably end up playing some video games. Again, spiking our dopamine. Makes us feel really great. And then maybe in the afternoon, we start watching some Netflix. And again, that just spikes that dopamine. That makes everything feel really, really good. But what does that mean? That means that every time I try to do a task, every time I try to do something that's difficult, that moves me towards my goals, it seems so much more difficult because relative to the amount of dopamine that I was receiving from the TikTok I was watching, from the video games I was playing, from the Netflix I was watching, this gives me so much less dopamine. It's so much less enjoyable. And what happens? It just makes it harder. It makes it harder. We just feel like we don't want to do it because we want to do all these things that provide us with more dopamine. Think about it like this. Let's say I put a plate of sardines and Brussels sprouts in front of you. For most of you, you're probably looking at that going, yuck, I don't want to eat that. Okay, you probably don't want to eat that right now. But then, let's say that you didn't eat food for a week, and then I put a plate of sardines and a plate of Brussels sprouts in front of you. You would probably hoof it down. You'd probably inhale it. You'd probably just one bite, all of it. Now, why is that? Is that because you suddenly really like Brussels sprouts and you suddenly really like sardines? Or is it because you haven't been eating things that were more enjoyable than that? You've literally been eating nothing. Same as if you just ate literal poo every day and I gave you that plate of sardines, you'd probably really like it as well. It's that relative to the dopamine that you were receiving from what you were eating previously, you're receiving a huge amount of dopamine from that. It's the exact same as if I told you for the next 6 hours, you have to sit in a chair and you have to just stare at a blank wall. You just have to stare at a blank wall and you have to watch paint dry for 6 hours. And then I said to you, okay, you have an option. For the next hour, you can either continue to sit and watch that paint dry or you can go for a run. You'd probably be like, hell yeah, I want to go for a run. That sounds like a great time. That sounds like a lot of fun. But then what would happen if right now, let's say you're just middle of scrolling TikTok. I said to you, okay, you have two options here. You can either continue to scroll TikTok, you can also play video games, or you can watch TV, or you can do whatever you want, or you can go for a run. You're probably like, yeah, I think I'll stick to the TikTok, thanks. Why is that? It's because relatively, the amount of dopamine that you would receive from going for a run is so much less than the amount of dopamine that you would receive from just watching TikTok, from just scrolling. That most people, 99% of people, are just going to stay watching TikTok. But in the same situation, most people are also going to choose the run if their alternative is staring at a blank wall. And that's because we've created an environment right now where we're just feeding ourselves dopamine, we're feeding ourselves stimulation all day. That it means that any task that we attempt to do that produces relatively a lot less dopamine seems a lot harder. You don't want to do it, right? Because it's just like that plate of Brussels sprouts and sardines. It's not appetizing because everything else you've been eating was so much better. If you guys are enjoying this, if you would like to learn more, I have a completely free course on how to dopamine detox. You can check that out at school.com/modernmonk. It will certainly make your life feel a lot easier. So check that out. I'll leave a link in the description. Otherwise, keep enjoying the video. Now, the second big issue and the massive reason why everything feels so difficult is because we got those huge spikes, because you were getting those massive surges of dopamine from scrolling TikTok or from playing video games or from watching TV, because you received those huge spikes, what happens is your brain has to go, you are receiving too much dopamine. This is just out of control. This is not normal. This is not how a human should be. So what is it going to do? Well, it's going to have to bring all of your dopamine down. Literally bring the amount of dopamine that you receive from everything down. So not only are the video games and the TikTok and the social media and the Netflix going to produce less dopamine, but also doing your work produces less dopamine. Going for a run produces less dopamine. Spending time with your friends produces less dopamine. Brushing your teeth produces less dopamine. Everything produces less dopamine. And what does it mean if everything produces less dopamine? Well, fundamentally, it just means that everything is less enjoyable. Your brain enjoys doing everything less. And what happens if it enjoys doing everything less is that everything becomes a lot more difficult. And if everything is more difficult, you're much less likely to do things that are going to move you towards your goals. You're much less likely to take on those low dopamine tasks because they just seem so difficult, so out of your reach, and so tough. Because what we've done is we've really just brought the dopamine down for everything. We've just been absolutely jamming in the dopamine drip, just pure dopamine all day, that our brain has regulated our levels like it should, like brains do. It's regulated those levels, and now everything is tough. Everything seems difficult. Everything seems out of our reach, and we wonder why we can't get anything done. We wonder why we have no motivation. The reality is, you've cooked your brain. You've absolutely incinerated your brain to a point where everything seems like a mountainous task. Things that would just be a walk in the park for the average person 100 years ago seem so damn difficult. And it's not because those tasks are any harder. It's just because your ability to perceive those tasks and the dopamine that those tasks receive is so much less. It's no harder of an activity. It's just in your mind, it seems so much more difficult because of what you've done to your brain. And this brings me to point number 3, and I think this is the scary one, is that pretty much every single person right now has wired their brain for failure. Let's say I gave you the power to create a human being. And I said, I want you to create me a human being. And I want you to guarantee me that that human being fails at whatever they're doing. How would you create that human being? How would you set up their environment? Well, first thing you would do is you would set up their environment. You would probably provide a lot of obstacles, a lot of things that were going to get in the way of them achieving a result, achieving an outcome. And then how would you wire their brain? Well, you would probably wire their brain in a way that they only want to do the things that get in the way. They're only attracted to the obstacles. And the more they do the obstacles, the harder it gets for them to actually do the things that are going to guarantee their success. And you keep providing a feedback loop where they just consume more and more of the obstacles, and the more of those obstacles they consume, the more they want to consume those obstacles, and the harder it is for them to ever do things that are going to guarantee their success. If you created that human, you'd be like, fantastic, I've just guaranteed that this person is going to fail. Well, this is what we've done to ourselves. The obstacles that we have are the stimulating things in our environment that aren't moving us towards our goals. TikTok, gaming, social media scrolling, television, pornography. All of these things are the obstacles in the way. And every time we do those activities, we receive dopamine. That's our brain telling us, that's great. I really like the fact you did that. I want you to do more of it. So here's the dopamine. I'm going to reinforce you to do that behavior. And when you receive that dopamine, all you want to do is more of that behavior. And what happens the more and more we do that behavior is that the more dopamine we receive, so the less dopamine we get from everything, including those tasks that we're trying to get done. And when those tasks we're trying to get done produce less dopamine and we want to do the obstacles more, we're cooked. We're just guaranteed to fail. And this is what we've done to ourselves. And it's not getting better. The term TikTok brain exists, yet TikTok has been around for less than 10 years. We've seen how much it's destroyed our minds, how much it's destroyed our attention spans, our ability to concentrate, our ability to complete tasks for something that's been around for less than 10 years. What's going to happen in 10 years' time? What's going to happen in 20 years' time? I guarantee you it's not going to be better. But we continue to wire our brains in a way that it reinforces us to do things that get in the way of our goals and constantly make it harder for us to actually achieve things worth achieving. And it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure. It just gets worse and worse and worse over time, and it compounds. Now, yes, this sounds very, very bad. What is the fix to this? How can we resolve this issue? Well, the way we can resolve this issue is through dopamine detoxing, is through reducing the amount of stimulation of dopamine we get from activities that don't move us towards our goals. I call it achievement-free dopamine. Can we remove all of the dopamine, all of those spikes of dopamine from things that don't move us towards our goals? Because what happens if we remove all of those spikes, all of those things that weren't moving us towards our goals, and we only receive dopamine from the things that moved us towards our goals? Well, at the start, we're not going to have these huge spikes. And when we don't have those huge spikes, our brain's going to go, this person is producing very, very little dopamine. We have to bring the baseline. We have to bring the average up. So how does it do that? Well, you have to receive more dopamine from doing everything. In the same way that you received less dopamine from doing everything when you had those huge spikes and you're producing too much, you're going to start producing more dopamine from everything because you have too little. And now that you're receiving more dopamine from everything, working towards your goals, doing those tasks that move you towards becoming a better version of yourself, give you more dopamine. They become more rewarding. And we talk about, remember when I said build a human to guarantee failure? If I was going to build a human to guarantee success, I would remove all the obstacles from their environment that would prevent them from getting to where they wanted to go. And I would wire their brain in a way that every time they do actions that move them towards their goals, they get rewarded. They get reinforced for doing more of it. And it makes them want to do it more and continue to do the actions that move them towards our goals. And this is very much what we do. When those actions, only the actions that move you towards your goals, produce dopamine, you've now reinforced your brain to go, okay, I get rewarded when I do this activity, so I need to do more of this activity. And because this is a good activity, because it's an activity that moves us towards our goals, it just keeps going. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it will guarantee your success. Now, the big thing here is the action that you take. No outcome is going to change unless you change your actions, but we're putting you in a position where you love doing the actions, you love doing the work that actually moves you towards your goals, that actually guarantees your success. And that is how, in a very real way, you make everything seem easier. Because if everything is producing more dopamine, then everything is more enjoyable. And when everything is more enjoyable, everything is easier. And when everything is easier, you're going to get more done. So we're literally just flipping the script on what we're currently doing, on what everyone in society right now is doing, which is destroying our brain, creating negative feedback loops, just making us more and more brain dead. We're reversing it. We're rewarding ourselves for doing activities that move us towards our goals. And the sky's the limit. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please like, please subscribe. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.